I'd like to call to order the February 13th, 2024 regular monthly meeting of the South Gravel Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors. And I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight, especially one very distinguished guest we have that will be speaking with us shortly. And with that, Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Gooch,
Present.
Commissioner Kaczynski,
Present.
Commissioner Way,
Present.
Councilperson Daniels,
Present.
Commissioner Jordan, sorry, Commissioner Karen,
Present.
and Commissioner McLean.
He's, I think he won't be with us tonight, will he?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are accounted for.
All right. And now, if we'll go to, Mayor Jordan for our invocation.
Heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, this evening we come to you, thanking you for the many blessings that you've bestowed upon us. We also ask that you be with us as we go through our SOGWASA agenda. Allow us to make the best decisions for our citizens and the communities that we serve. These and all of the blessings we ask in your name, I pray. Amen.
Amen. And now if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Thank you. Next order of business is the election of annual meeting election of the SOGWASA officers. I'll turn this over to Jim. Okay.
You ready for me to see what luck you have tonight?
Yeah, let's see what we come up with.
Okay. Well, I entertain nominations for the position of chair.
I make a nomination that the chair stay as Jimmy Gooch.
Okay. There's been a nomination of Jimmy Gooch for chair. Is there a motion? Okay, there's a second by Mr. Karen. Is there a motion that nomination be closed? So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the motion that nominations be closed, vote aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so now we'll call for the question. All in favor of Mr. Gooch being chair?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Mr. Gooch, it's your meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the floor is open for nominations for the vice chair.
Nominate Mayor Pro Tem Juliana Kaczynski.
Second.
We have a nomination and a second. Is there a call to close nomination?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second to close the nominations. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All in favor of Mayor Pro Tem Kaczynski as our vice chair for the board, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, reelected.
Reelected.
Yeah. Now, treasurer and secretary, is that we need to go through the motions with that?
Yes, because we have, even though we have our current board secretary, Crystal Lee, and treasurer Richard Ballmer are willing to continue serving in their respective positions should the board care to nominate them. I think last year, I think that one of our board members offered a motion to appoint or elect both of those current members, so.
I'd like to make a motion to have Crystal Lee and Richard Ballmer. You need two separate motions?
It can be in one moment.
Thank you.
We have a second.
Early.
Nominations be closed.
And we have a motion to close nominations. Second for that. Any discussion? And we'll go to the vote. All those in favor of reappointing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. You're reelected. Thank you.
Crystal, congratulations.
Yeah. Was this a case, Director Shore, is this a case of being voluntold for this position?
No, not at all.
Okay,
Be happy to serve the board another year.
thank you, and we appreciate everything you do for us, both of you, so very much. And now that we've gotten our annual meeting and election offices,
Person,
it's in November.
sorry. It has to be part of the record.
Oh, that's been part of the record.
The wife asked me to do that.
Yeah. Is there any adjustments to the, you didn't throw me off here, Georgiana.
Doesn't take much.
It don't take much. Is there any adjustments to the meeting agenda? If there are no adjustments to the meeting agenda, do I hear a motion to approve this? Got a motion to approve. Do I hear a second? We have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. Now we're down to the review and approval of the minutes from the January 9th, 2024 meeting. I trust everyone's had a chance to read these over. Is there any comment?
Motion that we approve the minutes from the January 9th, 2024 board meeting.
And we have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed likewise. Motion carries. The minutes have been approved. Did we have any sign up for public comments?
No.
Okay, so we have no public comments. And let's see. Discussion item. Yeah. We don't have anything for group discussion items tonight, so we'll move on to item number 10. United States Department of Agriculture, letter of commitment for a $35 million loan for the I-85 sanitary sewer system improvement project. And we have, for this presentation, we have our executive director and Ms. Julia Johnson of the Water Environment Program Specialist with the USDA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, as Julia, please to the podium. I'd like to introduce again Julia Johnson with the USDA. I've had the pleasure of working with Julia for several months on this project, the I-85 project. The agenda information and the background, I think that the board has seen over and over again as far as the history of this project and where we are today. So I won't cover a lot of that. I will point out two important parts, though, or a couple important things, and that's that we're continuing to make great progress on the I-85 project in terms of the engineering for that to stay on schedule. And secondly, talking about the financing for the project as well. We've secured an ARPA loan for this project already, and another important part of our funding is with the USDA for $35 million low interest loan. So this evening, Julia is here to talk about the letter of commitment on the $35 million loan for the I-85 sanitary sewer project. So Julia, if you would, please.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to say good evening to you all. I thank the chairman and the board for allowing USDA Rural Development to have an opportunity to help South Granville Water and Sewer Authority. It is a tremendous project for us. We are very excited for the authority. So there are two documents. There's multiple documents in your that were presented to you, but there are two that I'm going to concentrate on tonight. One of those is the letter of conditions. And I'm going to go through certain aspects of the letter of conditions because it's 25 pages long, as my husband reminded me when he presented it to me. And then after we get through the letter of conditions, there's a resolution that the board will need to pass in order to say that you're interested in this fund. So I'm going to start with the letter of conditions. And because when you can go to the second page, I'm not going to read every item because you're capable of doing that yourself. But, the first, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the project scope, because I think it's really important for us to understand the project scope. This is a very large project. Funds that are going to be used in this project are going to be used to construct 3 new wastewater lift stations. About 29,700 linear feet of 8-inch to 20-inch sewer force main. About 30,700 linear feet of gravity sewer line. There's about 6 lift stations that have to be abandoned. And then about 1,700 linear feet of water main to serve the new lift stations in various locations. The project funding is going to come from USDA as the agency of 35 million loan. An applicant contribution of 6,873,000. An other funding source of 29,478,000, which is the ARPA money that's already been received. For a total project cost of $71,351,351,000. Changes in the funding sources, like after we obligate the money, if there's any changes in funding sources, then USDA needs to know what those changes are. So that, you know, we can look again at what the funding scenario is for the project, and that's after obligation. If we were to have a cost overrun or something like that, then we're interested in what are we going to do? So that's going to be one of the times that we've had a situation where there might be a change in funding. And we need to look at that again at that time. I'm not going to look at the project budget because that's just a breakdown of how we got to the 71 million. I do want to go to the project timeline. It's number 4. Because this is such a large project, typically we want our projects completed and through construction in 3 years. This is a big project. We already know based on the timeline that's been presented, that's not going to happen in 3 years. So we have given the timeline of 5 years for this project to be completed. That is by regulation, the longest period of time that we can give. If for some reason there's milestones in your letter of conditions that shows the final completion is expected as of November of 2027, you know, typically, and that's, we'd like to say, yes, we know that's going to happen. But normally when you get in construction, you always have issues. So we know that there's a potential it might be a little longer than that. That's fine. That's okay. But when I get to 3 years from the date of the obligation on this project, then I start having to ask for waiver requests and let them know, let National know what's coming. We still need the money. We're going to need it through this time. So you're not going to be left with being in the middle of construction and not having money. Okay, so don't worry. I'm taking care of this. There's the rates and terms for this particular project. If you look under section 2 at rates and terms, the interest rate is going to be the lower of the interest rate, either at obligation or at the time we close. Okay. When we obligate this loan, the interest rate is looking at 3.75. That's what we're looking at right now, 3.75. When we get to closing in 4 years, if the rate is lower than that, then you're going to get the lower rate. If the rate is higher than 3.75, you don't have to worry about it. You're locked in at 3.75. Okay. It is a term of 40 years. The first payment will be due principal and interest the June 1st after in the year in which we close. So if we're scheduled and it looks like we're going to complete construction in 2027, we always get a little bit of time to get to the closing. So when we go out for financing, we're probably going to give you to 2028. So if we close in April of 28, then you'll have a payment due June 1st of 28. If it goes beyond June 1st of 28, then it'll be due the next on June 1st. It is due every year on June 1st in the year in which we close, and then annually thereafter. So for Richard's sake, since Richard's sitting behind me here, for his sake, we're saying that you should planning purposes at a 3.75% interest that has an annual payment of $1.7 million. 1.703. If we get to closing and that rate is lower, obviously that amount of the payment is going to decrease, and we'll deal with that at that particular time. So we're just saying for planning purposes, this is what you count on, 3.75, 40 years, and the payment looks like an annual payment of 1.7. The security on this loan is going to be a revenue bond in the amount of $35 million. The revenue bond will actually be toward the end of construction, where we're finishing construction, and we, as USDA, pay out on the interim financing that you got in the form of a bond anticipation note. Our loan will become the permanent loan. The reserves for this project, we require a debt reserve fund that is equal to one annual installment that accumulates at a rate of 10% over 10 years. So what that means is, for planning purposes, 10% of the loan installment would be like $14,192 per month. So annually, you're going to have a debt service reserve of $170,310. That over 10 years' time, you're going to put that amount annually in an account that over 10 years' time will equal one annual payment. Now, that's debt service reserve is your money. I want you to understand that. It's your money. However, because we're requiring that it be set aside, if you need to use that money, then we request that you ask to use the money in writing. And then once that money is used and you get back to a point, you have to build that account back. Also, there's a short-lived asset reserve that has to have a deposit. And what the short-lived asset reserve is basically because we're putting federal dollars into a system, we want you to be able to replace your system as things are needed to be replaced. So the short-lived assets are those items in your system that you're setting aside money for that you can replace either in 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, or beyond if needed. I'm going to go over to section 3, where it talks about requirements that need to be met prior to advertise for bids. And there's one item in there that I really want to discuss and point out. You're coming to us at a great time, because just back in May 14th of 2022, the federal government put into place this Build America, Buy America Act. And during that time, it means that when you get funding from the federal government, then you have to look and make sure that the source of the manufacturing and the equipment that you're using in your system is American made. Is here in the United States, or can be certified to that. Back because your application came in during a period when there is a project waiver in place for that, you are not required to meet conditions for Build America, Buy America, which only adds money to your project if you have to meet that. So you are under the previously planned project, because we've been working on this for so many years, and you were granted a waiver for the BABA requirements December 13th, 2020. Yeah, that's a big win for Siwassee right there. I'm going to go over to number 15. There's lots of things that are required prior to advertisement for bids, but there's certain things I want you to see and understand. One of the big things that holds up projects a lot of times are property. Because you're getting federal dollars, we have to have confirmation that the money that we're putting in this project, all the equipment is owned by the entity that's borrowing the money. The way we do that is seeking, certification and acknowledgement from you guys or from SWASA that, you have secured all the property rights for the project. I believe Jim is probably already working on that. So that's just one area that if it's gonna hold us up, it's gonna be in that area. And I have to have those property rights and acknowledgement of those property rights in place before I can ask for loan closing instructions. We have to have loan closing instructions before we or authorize it. I'm gonna go on paper, Crystal. Number 18. When we underwrote this project with having at least 4,842 residential users and 445 non-residential users on the system. Right before we are planning to authorize the bid and try to get to construction, we have to have certification from SWASA that you have at least that many users on your system. If you have more, that's great. But we have to have at least 4,842 because that is what the underwriting was based upon for your repayment. Number 19, construction account. I wanted to cover that just a little because this is going to be sort of the important picture. We don't require that there be a separate construction account for project funds. However, I do think it is a good idea to have a separate construction account for project funds. But if you do not, or if you do, no matter what, you have to be able to separate and identify and report and account for all that federal money and where it went to and what it was used to. So be aware of that. The bank that you might be looking at putting the dollars in has to be covered by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and that coverage there. So please be aware of that. When we go to construction, right before we're getting ready to go to construction, we will require that you have interim financing on the $35 million. That interim financing will be in the form of bond anticipation notes that's sold as revenue bond anticipation notes by the local government commission. I know that SWASA has already been in contact with the local government commission. The local government commission is very aware of the project. So that is a good advance there. Also, each year you will have to have a proposed operating budget that's presented to USDA on an annual basis. And with part of that budget, we want to know what that rate schedule is. And we want to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of meeting your O&M, the debt service, and the reserve. I'm going to skip over permits. That's just a common thing that everybody's got to have whenever you're building anything. I'm going to look at the risk and resiliency assessment and the emergency response plan. We don't usually talk about that particular requirement much, but I want to bring it up tonight because of all the cyber attacks that we are having across the nation. And prior to advertising for bid, you're already an existing borrower for us. So we're only looking for certification that you have that risk and resiliency assessment, what we used to call the vulnerability assessment, and an emergency response plan. As part of that, if you've not considered the cyber, having a cyber plan and making that a part of your emergency response plan or your risk and resiliency plan, we prefer that be updated and that be a part of that. Just be aware. And that section sort of covers what we've got to have prior to authorizing the bid. And USDA will authorize the bid. When it's time to go to bid on the project, we will say you're now authorized to bid. If you go to bid prior to us authorizing the bid, it is at your office. I'm going to look a little bit at section 4, requirements for construction. And the big thing in here, you can go to number. The big difference another difference that's had that has taken place over the last several years is that USDA is required to do what we call do not pay checks. It looks to make sure that you're a part of the SAM registration and that you're also not barred. USDA will look at SWASA and SWASA's executive director and the finance office. That SWASA will have to do the checks on any lower tier people like contractors. So when you send in a pay request to us, we're gonna check you out. But you're gonna be in our financing, so we won't have to, before we say, yes, you can go withdraw this money. Before you pay out to your contract or your legal or your bond counsel, then you need to make sure that you're doing the do not pay checks for those vendors, for those lower tier vendors. Still doing that. That is a big difference over the last several years. I'm going to go over to section 5, requirements at closing. When we get to the point in time and we're ready to close, we will require, as the WASA already is, for them to be on a pre-authorized debt payment schedule. Where, we draft the money from that account every July 1st. Every June 1st. And so that already happens with the process. So it's going to be the same thing for this loan as well. The rest of the information, I'm going to go over to section 7, which is basically deals with some servicing requirements once we close the loan. If you make an extra payment, say you're going to prepay some on your loan with USDA, it's fine for you to do that. There is no penalty against that. You can pay how much extra you want at no penalty at all. So be aware of that. When you pay that extra payment, it will come off the back of the loan. Because we are setting up a revenue bond that has principal payments each year. That principal is going to stay those payments every year until we get down and the extra payments will come off the back. The other big thing is that because we're getting $35 million, you will be required to give us an annual audit each year. In that annual audit, it is a requirement and it is an ask that the enterprise fund be separated between water and sewer. Because we need to look at making sure that the sewer is sustainable. On an annual basis, we will do that. Also, that debt service reserve and that short-lived asset reserve needs to be shown as a restricted asset underneath the current assets. I'm primarily saying that because I want you to understand that, and if there's any questions, we can discuss that as we talk. But that is going to be a requirement. And I think the rest is just pretty much general information. I've covered a lot of material. And I understand that it's a lot of material. But if you have any questions, I will entertain questions before we look at the resolution.
Any questions?
You said that if we put this out for bid before we got the authorization from you, we were at risk. What does that mean?
Okay. It means that when we authorize the bid, we have looked at everything that needs to be in place before we can start. Okay, everything that the federal government needs in place for their money. Right? If you do not wait for us to authorize the bid and you decide you're going to go ahead and go on your own, then you're doing that at your risk. Whatever, if we don't get the rest of the information we need to authorize the bid, and we never give our money to you.
Just about answers that question.
Anyone else?
Now, I understand in Scott's situation with SWASA, you have ARPA money. That's a totally separate contract from what's going to be the USDA contract. Okay. So we know that ARPA is already going to go out to bid before we have the information in place that is needed to be there for USDA. Okay, so. I don't want. The goal is to get through the same place, right? To get the project done. So, while I want you to be careful and make sure we authorize the bid, are we gonna work with you? Yeah.
Just, oh, go ahead. No.
One more question, and this is kind of like for both of you. You talked about the letter of commitment. I don't have a letter of commitment. I have a letter of conditions. Were you talking about the same thing, or is there another letter I don't know about?
The letter of intent to meet conditions is what we're talking about.
Okay, because you said letter of commitment. I'm like, there is no letter of commitment. Just wanted to check.
The letter of conditions is basically everything that we're gonna need to get the project, through construction and beyond. And the big thing about USDA, you're not doing this by yourself. We have an area specialist who would have been here tonight to present to you, except for she's on a trip to Florida with her family to Disney World. And I didn't think it was fair to say,
And you wanted to come to this
I
Disney
was
World.
like, I didn't think it was fair to say you can't do this. So I told her I would do it. So she's gonna be with you and she's gonna be letting you know next steps. We'll get through tonight. We'll get it obligated and then she'll be sending you, these are the next steps. So we're with you the whole way.
And just if I may make a comment, based on the funding with the ARPA and the USDA, we plan to keep you informed the whole way through this journey, even on the ARPA funding, because I know that project is a major component to the success of the USDA piece.
And we have to track every bit of those dollars.
Exactly. So this won't happen in a vacuum by any means. This will just be constant communication for the next 2 or 3 years as we're building this project as well, and then closing it.
Right. Because we do have to track all of the dollars, not just our dollar. We have to track $71 million. And so we'll be tracking your dollars, our dollars, and our dollars. Are there any other questions? So if there's no other questions, the other thing in your packet was a resolution. That resolution basically gives, it says that you're going to agree to the intent or to the letter of conditions and the intent of the letter of conditions. And it also gives the chairman and the secretary the right to sign all the obligation documents. In your obligation packet or in your funding packet, there were 4 loan resolutions. There were 4 1940-1 forms, which are requests for obligation forms. And there was a letter of intent. There was an assurance agreement, and there was a equal opportunity agreement that made up your packet. So the resolution basically just says that you're going to take the 35 million according to the letter of conditions and gives the chairman and the secretary right to sign those documents, accepting loan. So I guess I need a motion to
Accept the loan resolution.
mhm.
Make a motion to accept the loan resolution.
Okay, do I hear a second? We have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you so much. I will make one more comment before I leave. I have said this to Scott and his group over the last several weeks. You had a fabulous and very, I want to use the word intelligent, although you are. I mean, you have a very good group that is running this operation. So I really appreciate it.
Thank
It's all
you.
up to Richard.
It's all up to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always good to hear.
So, Mr. Chair, I just like to mention, thank you for being here this evening to walk us through this, and I'm sure that you'll be able to answer any questions that we have. On a point of signing these documents, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of documents that we have to sign.
Yeah.
Evening, we'd like to sign so that we can get them forwarded to Julia tomorrow morning. So I'd like to take the opportunity, if we may, at the close of the meeting, to keep you here for 20 minutes, possibly just to sign the documents so that we can then get those scanned tomorrow morning. So thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we've got that portion of our agenda completed, and very thankful to everyone that's worked so diligently on this, and we certainly appreciate it. Now we'll move on to our item number 11, our amended system development fee policy. And Mr. Schroyer.
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. So as you mentioned, this is the amended system development fee policy, commonly known as the SDF policy. And this is recommended for adoption this evening. So I will just cover the background and the legislative history, and also talk a little bit about the analysis here this evening as well. So Seguas has had an allocation policy originally adopted in 2006. There have been subsequent amendments to that policy in 2007, 2008, and the most recent version in 2016. And the allocation policy was developed to manage efficiently and effectively the distribution of scarce water and wastewater resources for the benefit of the entire southern Granville County region. The allocation policy describes certain timetables for requesting parties to pay the system development fees, aka SDFs, associated with the allocations. The proposed system development fee policy will replace the current Seguasa allocation policy in total. In terms of the legislative history, the draft system development fee policy was discussed at the January 9th, 2024 Board of Directors meeting with the following action: a motion to approve the amended Seguasa system development fee policy draft and direct the executive director to submit the draft policy to each governing body for their review and comments for a period of no less than 30 days. Motion passed, 7 votes in favor. In terms of the analysis, the following day of the board meeting, I sent out an email requesting comments be returned to the executive director by 5 p.m. on 2/9/2024. Following, Seguasa staff will review all comments received and determine if any changes are recommended to the draft STF policy prior to bringing it back to the board of directors for their consideration for adoption. You can see my notes below that between 1/10/24 and 2/9/24, I had various conversations, many conversations with all Seguasa members regarding the proposed STF policy. In summary, the general consensus of the membership was the proposed STF policy is a major departure from the current policy, yet based on the state law, it appears that a policy change is required. There were questions regarding how Seguasa will manage requests for utility capacity commitments from developers for multiple phased or multiple years construction. There were questions regarding how participating agencies can improve the coordination of the planning review and the approval processes to ensure timely and accurate process reviews and approvals for all involved. And there were questions regarding the loss of dedicated allocations for each community for economic development purposes. I'll just pause there before I move on to a recommendation, just to see if the board has any questions at this point on anything that I've covered.
Any questions from anyone?
I mean, the biggest thing about this is we've already approved the draft policy.
That's correct.
Correct. So we're still in the draft form.
That's
And
correct.
you've received, as you stated, the concerns that our municipality has with the current draft policy.
Correct.
So it also states that we're going to have a layout or manual, as you would say, that's going to be coming forth. Is that correct?
There's an item in the draft policy. I think it is under item 4, page 2. Well, it's on page 74 of your agenda, but page 2 of 3 of the proposed plan that talks about system development fee policy procedures manual.
Correct.
That all persons or entities seeking to obtain water and or sewer service from Seguasa with respect to new development shall follow the procedures set out in the system development fee procedures manual, should one be adopted and implemented by the executive director. And let me just explain that a little bit further. When you look at the comparison between the proposed policy and the previous allocation policy, the policy was laid out over many pages to include both policy and procedure. So what we've done basically is we've taken a look at state law and the compliance of that, and we've pulled the two apart and said basically, okay, let's just look at a policy statement, a pure policy here for the board And there's going to be procedures that are necessary to support this policy, also to work with the jurisdictions to make sure that we go through this policy process. And that's when we came up with the idea of and recommended that we have a procedures manual. So a procedures manual, for example, would be, how does somebody apply for this? What are the timetables? How do we work with the local jurisdictions as far as making sure that we've reviewed plans, we've submitted a combination permit, we've coordinated with the county, if you will, as far as building permits, so on and so forth. So there's going to be set procedures in that procedures manual for that guidance on how we're going to actually manage this policy. It's not going to be much of a departure from what the existing policy is, although there are some parts that have been pulled out of that.
And how are we going to determine allocation to the municipalities?
In terms of,
The way it's set up is the first come, first served type basis.
correct.
So if Butner has this large influx of homes and gets a certain amount of allocation, and it's time for us we finally get ours completed in Creedmoor, and we want to do some allocation there. How do we know which allocations left? Is Butner going to get a certain amount? Is Creedmoor getting a certain amount? Or is it, okay, we're going to just do it until it's gone, and whoever comes and gets it that's who gets it?
I think basically your second statement is correct. So the allocation is based on the capacity that you have at your existing wastewater and water plants. And we know where those are located. And your capacity is also limited by what you actually have in the pipe. So you have to look at the combination of those two. You have to look at your plant capacity, and you also have to look at your capacity within your region. One of the city of Creedmoor is constrained right now, not by the plant capacity. It's constrained by the infrastructure capacity to carry it through the pipe.
Correct.
That's what we're addressing with the I-85 project. So once you finish the I-85 project and you have capacity in the service network that we're creating for the next 20 years, balanced with the amount of service capability that we have at the plants, there isn't a mechanism in there that guarantees or sets aside allocation for each community, because it's a finite resource, both at your plants and at your infrastructure. So depending on where a development would come in any of these entities, we have to look basically downstream and see what the capacities are within that pipe system and pump stations to be able to supply sewer to that facility, or water, what's in the existing area. And in some cases, there may be, depending on the geography, that a developer or a person will have to invest in infrastructure to make sure that they have the capacity. So when you look at the region of the network, the service area, you may have demands in Creedmoor, Butner, and STEM in the county all going on at the same time. And they're all hitting different portions of your network, basically, that are supplying water through to those different regions. As long as we're not exceeding capacity at either one of the plants or exceeding capacity in any one of the pipe systems, then we're simply moving forward with awarding capacity and system development basically for those areas or those projects.
Thank you for your explanation.
So to go back to the procedure manual, like Robert just asked about, it states in here, procedure manual, should one be adopted and implemented. There's no guarantee it's going to be one. I have some comments from the town of Butner that were shared with us. And they're asking pretty much the same question that Rick just asked about the allocation. And she's got a note here on page 15. I assume there's a typo among the second bullet under example 3. Shouldn't the amount also be $55,480? I thought the same thing when I saw that question. Now, they're not looking at what we've got here. They're looking at more extensive stuff. We're talking about page 15. We don't have 15 pages.
If you go back to the packet that we sent to each community, which is part of your packet that I sent to the board saw at January 9th, I think that's what they're referring to as part of the page 15. And they're looking at example 2.
Huh?
And they're calling out that Example 3, so a developer desires to build a 10-unit commercial facility on a single lot and needs 10 water and sewer allocations at a total cost of $55,480. So $5,548 is one ERU for
It's 10, and that's right.
combination. So the developer desires to build a 10-unit commercial facility. So in total, you would take one ERU times the 10 units, that gets to be $55,480. Okay,
That's what,
now, it goes on to say that based on the new law, if Seguasa commits the total water and sewer service at the beginning of the project, the developer sitting here right next to me and says, we want to do this project. And we, Seguasa, want to commit the whole entire capacity to the developer of that 10-unit project, that developer would pay us that total amount.
55,400.
Now, if the developer not commit, or if Seguasa does not commit total water service at the beginning of the project, then the developer would pay one SDF, 5548, at the time of application for connection of the individual units of the 10-unit development. Okay, so we've taken the 10 units and divided it up, and so you're back to 5548. So you could potentially have different customers in each unit of that building if they're metered separately. So then each unit would then pay the 5548. They get their meter and they hook up their account. So therein lies kind of the difference. You know, do you pay it all up front? Does the developer want to pay all that and not have sub meters in the units? I'm not sure. We don't know that at this point, but the example was to show that that's the nuances of this law and how we have to apply these allocations and FCFs based on subdivided land or one parcel, so on and so forth. So I think the example is correct.
I guess this is kind of Jim question here. The statute was written for pretty much the whole state of North Carolina, where most water and sewer utilities are owned by the municipality. Seguasa and Owassa are different situations. And that's why we are concerned about allocation. Now, if the county goes under this rule, it's fine. They're just dealing with Wake County.
They have this. Well,
And Raleigh's water and sewer is Raleigh's water and sewer. Got Butnerstem, Creedmoor County, and Robert's correct, and so is Mr. Frangos, that there's no guarantee that Creedmoor is ever going to get any allocation. I mean, if it all goes, first come, first served. So if the developers come in late, Creedmoor's not going to grow. And I don't understand why we haven't pushed back against the legislators on this and said, why are we committed underneath this when we are in a whole different situation? By the same token, if Creedmoor develops first and Butner doesn't get any water and said, sorry, you can't build a thing, we applied for it first, we get it. This Seguasa is a whole different operation than what this legislate. I understand they don't care. And they just made a rule, they made a law that it's this. But I don't understand how this law can apply to this company when it goes over so many different municipalities, and there's no competition in Raleigh for water. It's Raleigh's water. There's no
Actually,
competition in Durham for Durham's water.
Durham's probably a better example. Raleigh is a very complex
Okay.
water issue, but yeah.
This is different. We are different. And there could be a problem. And the way these things read is, if there's no procedure manual, should one be adopted and implemented by executive? If there isn't one, whether there is or there won't be, it does say there doesn't have to be one. So all of this municipality is concerned that there won't be any water when we're ready. There's no way to guarantee that it will.
Let me make sure I understand your question. Or your
Whatever.
question or comment.
It's a little of everything.
Okay. So let me try to parse that a little bit. There are problems in the system development fee law, clearly. Scott and I have talked about that. In other words, the biggest problem to me is that you can't really commit an allocation to a developer. That's a separate issue than what you raised, but you can't commit an allocation to a developer and be prudent with your own resource until they're ready to pull down a building permit for a new development. So that's issue number one. And what that does to me is it makes a developer, if I'm a developer anyway, I have concerns about getting to a large project without having an assurance that I have an allocation. So to me, that's flaw with the law. I think it was supposed to be a very pro-development law. But the way it's actually having to be implemented, if you're trying to protect the local government, it goes in the opposite direction. And the issue you raise is a different one, to me anyway. I'm not clear that there's anything in the law, and I'm speaking off the top of my head, that would prevent WASA from adopting some way of looking at how allocation is shared among the jurisdictions. So Scott and I explore this a little bit further, and I think we were engaging an engineering firm who has statewide experience for this type thing to help us with some of this. Then certainly there may be ways that if it were the political will of the board to look at that differently, then there may be ways to do that. That's a different issue to me than what's strictly set down in chapter 162A.
It's just other municipalities that have municipal water systems. This rule applies to mostly them rather than us. And
I don't know that I understand. I agree that you've identified an issue that we have multiple jurisdictions, but I'm not sure that the law directly is the problem there. So I'm not clear that there's a impediment in the law for Saguasa's members to come up with something that may regulate how it's awarded within the jurisdiction.
so this law was, it's been in effect for how many years? 5 years, 4 years?
18 and 19, I don't remember. What I mean.
If we were in violation of the law since then, how come we haven't been?
We haven't been in violation of the law because we haven't had anyone request allocation because we haven't had any to give really. So it hasn't been a pressing issue.
It's 2019?
We haven't had any large,
No, we've had some single location requests that have come in. We've had some transfers, residential that have come in, but nothing's been built to any.
So the big subdivision that's going in Butner, when did they get their allocation? How many years
They
ago?
don't have an allocation.
They don't have one.
Still going through this process.
The concept plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they're still in the concept.
and there's not going to be an allocation. When they get their allocations, when they pull down their building permit, we can tell them that there's water and sewer. And what Scott said, let me try to reframe this because you've raised one issue, but he directly spoke to the other one. You can tell people where capacity exists currently, and Scott, jump in and correct me too, but we can tell people where there's capacity that exists. So out where that development exists, there's, I understand that there is at least some capacity in the lines and there's capacity at the plant, right? And so they can, at some point, they will come back to us and ask for a readiness to serve letter that spells that out more clearly. But we can tell them there is capacity in this line. This is how much capacity is in that line. And we can tell them that there's capacity at the plant and this is how much capacity is at the plant. They're going to be developing at their own risk. So we're not going to grant them a system development fee. Allocation is no longer a word really.
Exactly.
So we're not going to grant you a system development fee and you come in with your building permit in hand.
Right.
And so that means they have to have done all the infrastructure improvements. They have to have done everything necessary to develop that subdivision prior to coming in and getting that building permit. And so at least my way of thinking, the practical effect that's going to have is people are going to have to be conservative about how large of a subdivision they plan for to begin with. It's not going to be one of these grabs like we had out at Mangum Farms where back several years ago where we're still using up that allocation because they came in and said we want a 600, I don't remember how large it was, but 600 home allocation. And we say, okay, well, that's off the books. You've paid the system, you've paid the allocation fee. We're going to tell them where there's capacity in the pipes and where there's capacity in the plant. And so if someone came in today and requested an allocation in all of the areas of Creedmoor that I'm aware of, we could tell them well, there's capacity at the plant, but there's no capacity in the pipe. You can go ahead with, at your own risk, developer, you can go ahead and undertake your planning approval and development activities. But just be aware that until we finish these water, I'm sorry, these sewer system improvements, you won't be able to connect to our sewer line.
Okay, so I'm gonna back you up a little bit. You just said we're not gonna do the system development unless they have the building permit in hand. It's right here in the statute. If they haven't paid their system development fees, their system development fee has to be paid at the time of application for the building.
There are two,
If the amount of capacity is increased at the time, the amount, I read it to you guys yesterday.
yeah, I think you're,
Building permit shall require proof of collection of the system development fee.
I probably said that wrong. I think
Application.
they need to, and I can pull that out.
They go apply is what the statute says, which makes no sense
It's
to
in
me.
the statute, here. Okay.
It's 2C, paragraph 2C.
For new development involving the subdivision of land, the system development fee shall be collected by local government at the later of either the following: time of application for the building permit, when the water and sewer service is committed to the local government unit. So it's the later of the time of the application for the building permit, or when the water or sewer service is committed by the local governmental unit. And so
You gotta read 2C. It
the
says,
system development fee is collected under subdivision A1 of the section. The local government unit assesses the system development fee is different from the local government unit that issues a building permit. The local governmental unit issuing the building permit shall require proof of collection of the system development fee prior to the issuance of the building permit. So again, I think what we determined, and it's written out in the policy, we thought through that at the time, would be that they would have to basically bring us everything and we would have to have communication showing that everything was ready for the issuance of the building permit. They would take their receipt and then go get the building permit.
receipt from us.
Receipt from us, is that right?
That's what I'm,
Because the
That's what
county,
it says.
is telling me that they don't want to commit a building permit until they know that they have the allocation or the SDF.
and I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we're going in the right order, that they have to come here first.
But I think that you start to understand why we need a procedures meeting.
But from a,
Right.
and this is in the policy that's there, we went through all of that and made clear, as I recall, that where is it? What page is it?
Well, what are you looking for?
The policy, it's page 70.
Oh, starts on page 73.
So let's look at the actual policy, but the bottom line, the two things. They're happening almost the same instant in time. It's not like the old days where you came in and got an allocation and paid your 10% and could sit on it. Right? You've got to be done. You've got to be at the point of getting a building permit.
7 years? Yeah, I got that.
What are you talking about? So
7 years.
Finished. Or still.
The allocation sitting out there that nobody can use. That's bad. We'll stop that. I'm glad about that.
It is, and if I may, while Jim's still looking to say that because of what's in the law, and we are the utility for the region, but we're dealing with 4 governmental agencies that we support, and each one of them has a little bit different way of managing their process. We have to be involved in that process. Not only do we have to be involved with that in terms of plan reviews and approvals, but it has to be laid out in steps how we work with each agency and how it gets to the county and how the building permits get done and how that information gets returned back to the utility, because there's additional steps once building permits are issued as far as inspections that we do, meters that get installed, follow-up inspections, those type of things. So hence, I think that the challenge for Saguasa is really the coordination with all the entities. In fact, I've reached out to the county manager just to start those discussions and get a roundtable together so that we can talk about how we can do that in coordination. The reason I didn't put together a draft policy or procedures manual for this part of the policy was that I didn't know really which direction the board was going to go with the policy. So I have a draft that's written, which pulls a lot of the information out of the previous allocation policy. Because again, if you remember, I said the policy and procedures were mixed together, which was difficult to manage. So we stripped it out. So we have really the pure policy here, which really stands on its own. And we'll develop a procedures manual. I'm confident that that will have to be developed sometime within the next 90 days, most likely. And I only give you that schedule just based on our current workload of other projects, but it's
Well, the county manager mentioned that on Saturday. It's strategic planning that the municipalities and the zoning and inspections should all coordinate. And I understand that. But I just think this piece of legislation that they've passed. My personal opinion is they didn't take into considerations a water authority like ours is that spans other municipalities and you know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying?
Does you think,
Because of allocation, because of there's no set allocation for each municipality the way it used to be. So there's no guarantee that when
Well,
Freeport's ready to.
let's discuss allocation. Instead of saying Button and Creek, take two generic towns that are under water and sewer authority, town A, town B. You give each of them 200,000 gallon allocation of sewer. Town A uses up their allocation in 7-8 years. Town B uses 25% of their allocation. Do you starve out the other town? What do you do then?
Make another policy. You'd have the board would have to vote, and make a different policy. Or it would have to be requested. I don't know. But I know this
See, I don't think allocation is the answer.
total capacity is gonna be on this line when it's done. And we don't have a clue.
And you're looking at one line.
that, if I may, with all due respect, we do know that. We had to calculate all the hydraulics in the I-85 project to calculate all the densities for all the zoning for all the communities that it affected. So we actually came up with that volume. And we looked at that volume, we looked at that densities based on your zoning and comprehensive plans. And then we used those quantities to understand what the flow potential could be in those pipes for the next 20 years. And we've designed this $70 million project to look at conveyance of sewer basically through that system in this region that affects this for the next 20 years. So we've done the calculations. So there's a lot of concern today about we want to reserve allocation because it's a scarce resource. You're reaching a point in 3.5 years here where that's not really the concern because you have plenty of plant capacity. You're going to have eventually restrictions in certain pipes again, just based on geographies where people want to land. And I can't tell you exactly, neither can you, where they're going to land. But it won't be quite the issue that it has been for the last 4 years since I've been here and for the next 3 years until we get through the construction. But I think through real examples, we see where we've had allocation that was provided by Seguasa that people sat on for 10 years plus and still do that. And when I fill out an application to the state for the effects of new sewer going to a pump station, they ask what has been dedicated in the past that's on paper that hasn't been fulfilled yet. And that has to be reserved at the plant as well, because that's something that we've committed to. So it has to be banked. So every time we do something on the system, we look at that reserve that we've been doing year after year after year, saying that can't even be used in other places because it has to be held for some of these things. And I think that's one of the challenges that Seguasa's, I think that's one of the greatest challenges Seguasa is going to see in the next couple of years, is that because we're not providing this allocation reserve for a developer or developers, you may only have one pump station or so many pipes that you can actually get into in a certain region. And it is going to be a race. And there's no guarantees that developer A isn't going to use up all that allocation. Then developer B has to invest money in that pump station now to upgrade what they're putting into it. So there's going to be this is going to be an engineering hydraulics issue and commitment issue. Not so much for the board, but for these developers to figure out these plans. Now, working with the city of Creedmoor recently, and Seguasa works hand in hand with all the municipalities from a planning and utility perspective. Your team told me that the planner, that you have certain provisions on the number of years that you allow subdivisions not to be built, but you require a phasing plan. Is that correct?
As far as I know.
Okay, so we would want to be hand in hand with what you're knowing what the phasing plan is as well. Because we have to look at the infrastructure that we are possibly supplying. And if they're only going to do 2 phases out of 5 over the next 10 years, there may be somebody across the street that's going to do 2 phases in the next 5 years and they're done. Again, what kind of hydraulic capacity do they need into that same subsystem? So it's gonna be a lot of technology, a lot of hydraulics, a lot of engineering to balance this. So just wanted to say that just to kind of put things in perspective too, to help. So and just a statement, I have no concerns about sharing a procedures manual with the board and the public. One of the greatest challenges I see besides the communication is really just going through a process document workflow with each community to understand. Please document your process for me. Where do we fit in and how do we coordinate? Because at the end of the day, I want to ensure that the customer has a smooth path. And I want to make sure that each agency is able to check the box with their plan reviews, their permit fees, their inspections, whatever they're doing, because we all have a different part of that project from start to finish. And we have to do it efficiently, no doubt, especially considering, I think, the wave of development that you're going to see here through the whole area we get finished.
Also figuring out a way to deal with the developers in a way that both protects the utility and is fair to the developer, so they can have some certainty that their investment is a reasonable thing to do.
Policy open up more litigation possibilities.
Oh, I mean, I don't see that it opens up a whole lot of litigation possibilities, because it's pretty clear that you don't have any entitlement to it until you come in ready to get your building permit and then pay your system development fee and take your receipt and go get your building permit.
But also, I can see where developers could be a little leery about spending money without a written guarantee. So, it's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. It protects us from developers sitting on allocation, but it also leaves us a lot of uncertainty. And like any law that's written, you're going to have unintended consequences of it. It's going to be things in there that are not going to work in real life the way it was intended to when the law was written.
Fantasy land.
And that's put the ball in our lap. We've got to deal with it. And mainly Scott and Jim have to deal with it.
If you look at other new development instead of land subdivision, that allows you to collect the system development fee at the time of application for the individual unit of development. I'm sorry, at the time of connection of the individual unit of development to the service of services, or when the water or sewer service is committed by the local government unit. So it flips it from the subdivision of land issue, where you could charge it at the time that the local government unit committed the allocation. So it's just subdivision is at the time of application for a building permit, or when the water or sewer service is committed by the local government. And then the other new development at the time of application of the connection of the individual unit of development to the service or facilities, or when the service is committed by the local government. So
Is that stating that you have the option when the first service is hooked up? Does that mean you have the option of collecting the fees for the entire development?
I'm not sure about when it's hooked up, but
that would guarantee.
For other new development, it's at the earlier of, and for subdivision, it's at the later of. And so we cannot collect system development fee until the later of the application for the building permit, or when water or sewer service is committed by the local government. So we can't, the developer comes in and wants us to commit service to them, we can't do it. And unless they already have a building permit in hand, so the later of. And so when you look at the other new development. It's at the earlier of,
Mhm.
and so that's the part that I'm assuming developers lobbied for that provision because they were concerned about being required to pay a large system development fee
Yeah.
when they went through a subdivision process. But in effect, it's got it where they really can't get their investment back to expectations the way most people would want because,
Mhm.
because we can't commit to they have a building permit. So, I, I've thought, and I don't think Scott and I have talked about it in detail, but I've thought about whether there's something there that, um, that we could raise from a lobbying standpoint. I'm a little hesitant to do that in this context, and we can talk about that some other time. I'm a little hesitant to do that because I know we'll lose control over it. And this is something the developers wanted. If it's not working for them, they have very good lobbyists and plenty of them. So I think they can get it fixed.
It doesn't work for them. They need to go back to the drawing table.
And they know how to do that.
On that.
They know how to do that.
Okay. All right. Now, let's see, where we at, Scott?
I finished right before the staff recommendation. So the recommendation, I'll just give you my recommendation is the Saguasa board members approve the draft Saguasa System Development PSTF policy as shown in Exhibit 1, effective upon the adoption.
Would you, there's a section in here that I think we need to look at. And, based on the comments received, it's apparent that Saguasa and the participating membership communities need to discuss and devise how to best address the concerns related to the coordination of planning and review process. And I think you go on to talk about a software program.
I'm not sure if I went that deep on this memo. But I know that.
Mapping and possibility. Okay.
It's
It's a
just-
possibility of all agencies using a common software platform, review and approval process. Do you think that would help us out?
I think it would be a great improvement across all agencies as far as the coordination, quite honestly.
So everybody could look at it and see what step each developer or development is in.
And that's the reason why I'm pursuing additional conversations with the county manager and also the entities to see what type of task team we could put together to evaluate this. Because the agencies are using different software, so we have to have that conversation.
So my question says Saguasa Board of Members approved the draft Saguasa System Development Fee Policy. We've already approved the draft. Why are we calling it a draft again? Is this the final policy?
Well, yeah, I guess you could call it the final policy. It found in Exhibit 1. It's the final.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because we've already approved the draft once. We're doing it again.
Excuse me?
They approve sending it out to jurisdictions, not the actual final approval.
That's right.
Okay. Have we beat this one to death?
Yep.
I think we're good.
Is there any more discussion?
Call for the question.
Yeah,
No.
offer the motion, we accept our executive director's recommendation that the Saguasa board approved what was formerly known as the draft system development fee policy as shown in Exhibit 1.
Okay, we'll hear a second. We have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, likewise.
No,
We have one no. Ayes have it, motion carries. And now we'll move on to our fiscal year 23-24 second financial review. Richard, you gonna?
I'm gonna put me to sleep with that SDF stuff now. We're gonna have to wait back up. That's a little too deep in the weeds. Numbers are a little bit easier. So this is our second quarter, fiscal year 22, 23, 24 presentation. We've got one more to come, that'll be in May, and that'll be the third quarter, and of course, we don't do a year end because of all. And I'm gonna read what the note, kind of get on through that, because we'll hit all that in the presentation itself. So. We'll divide this presentation into 4 sections. Section 1 will be revenue, budget actual. 2 will be fund balance. 3 will be expenses by department, and 4 is a summary of the I-85 system process. We'll start with water revenue. And we'll go through these fairly quickly, but there'll be time for questions, or you can stop me at any time. Questions of each step. Water revenue, the budget is 5.7 million. We received the end of, like, really the second quarter courses ends December 31st, so this does not include January. But we're at 54%, 3.1 million. Anything above 50% on your revenues is where you want to be, so we're holding steady on that. Next slide. Sewer revenue, budget 8.8 million. We said we collected almost 4.8 million, that's 54%. So that's going good. So on those two, just like in the previous, we see that the new rate model is holding it with the projections for us, so that's good. Non-billing revenue, just a reminder, non-billing revenue are your fees. All your fee related services. And you'll see that the budget is 303,500. We're at 155,379 today, 51%. I will make one comment. The all the fees are holding steady at budget, but the tap fees and engineering fees right now are running low. So you may see some adjustments to those, but other fees, since they are relatively small for the budget, are all set in that. So that's why we're still in target in total for 15%. Next slide. Interest income is the one we talk about every quarter. You see that we budgeted slightly under $500,000. That was done last February, March. And then right after there, when the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates, you'll see today we're at 694,000. So we're at 143% of total budget. There is a general budget number coming to the board in March that will raise that revenue to new projections. Current projection for this fiscal year for interest revenue, feds do not reduce rates between now and June, is about 1.4 million.
I don't see that slide in.
There's 2 pages missing already. The sewer revenue is not in this booklet either.
With this one. So you might want to just spend a little time on that slide to see if there's any additional questions on that.
That was sewer revenue is missing.
It's right.
Sewer rev,
in the book, but not in here.
right, it's in the book, but it's not in the
Yeah.
handout. It's in the book.
Okay, so you do have a slot, so it's smaller version.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, we need to go back.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay. System development fee, overall, let's talk. So, just briefly, you know, we do not budget system development fees in some years unless we know there's big development coming along. And we discussed in the previous session, there are no big developments. Pipeline for the last 2 or 3 years, so you'll see we've only collected some individual houses at $13,192. Remember that in July, we'll bring you a resolution.
So we have collected system development fees this year.
So
Just on
individual.
Okay.
And you may recall back, those who have been on the board a while years ago, that number could be $1 million. Now we're well under that. I'll bring a resolution to the board at your end, and you know the actual fees collected. And by statute, you will designate what project you want those to go to. They're not mixed in with other income. That's why they're not in the different fees that we've previously looked at. That concludes the revenues. The next slide starts fund balance. And then we'll pause down. So fund balance, we've got 2 slides. Let's put it in 2 because the part was a little too condensed. And you'll see that the board through December has approved 6 budget amendments. And the total of all those budget amendments is nearly 3.7 million, but of that 3.7 million designated CIP fund balance was hit for almost 3.5 of that. So we had very little, less than 200,000 in bank operating. And that designated CIP, a large chunk of that is the rollover of the I-85 budget that didn't get expended last year. That is the revenue and fund balance sections. Any questions on those two sections? Okay, and we'll move on to expenses. The expenses you want to be below 50%, of course. The reverse of the revenues. You'll see that the limited budget for the admin department is just slightly under $1 million. We've expended slightly under $400,000, so we've expended 42% of that budget, well under the 50. Next slide. Human resources is similar. That's a very small budget, $137,308. We've expended $53,330, which is 39%. Good shape there. Next slide, please. Engineering budget, the amended budget is $110,812. You see, we've only expended slightly under $60,000. 14%. Of course, we know that's due to the vacancies in that. Next slide. Development collections, budget is slightly over $500,000. We've expended $205,929,000, 41%. Still well under the 50. Next slide, please. The water treatment facility. Now, water treatment includes raw water, which is the dam reservoir and the treatment plant itself. Budget is slightly over $2.1 million as amended. We've expended slightly under $1 million. We're at 46%. Slide, please. Wastewater treatment. Budget is slightly under $2.4 million. We've expended $895,690, 38%. Next slide, please. Utility maintenance. Just under $3.6 million budget. We've expended slightly over $1 million. We've expended 30% of the budget in that department. That department includes your water line maintenance, sewer line maintenance, and all your pump stations and meter reading. So it kind of comprises 4 departments. Next slide, please. Next department is depreciation board and other. You see that the budget is $2.549 million. We expended $1.3 million, 52%. As a reminder, in that department, we have the bulk of that department is depreciation, $3.3 million in the fiscal year we're looking at, and your P&L insurance and your workers' compensation policies. That's why that's above 50%, because we expend those and pay those July the 1st. So you've got a large hit at the 1st of July. And that will settle out as the year goes. Next slide, projects and studies. Of course, that's your I-85 project, 11 conference, few additional projects. Slightly under $6.5 million budget. We've expended $1.8 million, 28%. And of course, that's a long term, so you wouldn't expect to see 50. Debt service, next slide, please. Your budget in debt service is $3.8 million. We've expended $740,000, 20%. Just a reminder, as the USDA spoke to it earlier, a lot of our debt payments come due in May and June. So that's why that's so. We won't see that number reaches prime goal until June. That concludes the expenses. Any questions on those slides? The next slide is the I-85 collection project. We started doing this to kind of keep track of where we've been and where we are. So you see that the only contract right now that's up, the only item that we're under contract for is CDM Smith design, $5.7 million. So that's your budget. And you see this year so far, we've expended 1.6. So the total over the course of 3 fiscal years for that project is 3.7 million. Of course, that is being funded with ARP. And you'll see that we have received all of that option 3.7. Was one pending payment of the December 31st, and that of course was received in January. Next slide, please. Likewise, the board set aside $1 million to cover certain legal costs and land acquisition costs. And you'll see that so far it's $1 million that the board set aside. You'll see in 23-24, we've only expended less than $30,000. Total for all 3 fiscal years, slightly under $100,000. So we've only expended 9% of that $1 million. Slide. So then we'll just cover a brief summary. I think you can see from those slides as we had in the last quarter. Cumulative billing revenue for the year is trending back with expectations and materially a good sign. That's what you want to see in any financial update. Non-billing revenue for the year is trending with expectations, except we talked about it a little earlier, the tap fees are down. Here with the interest revenue, as we saw, is trending well above original expectations and budget. And there is budget amendment for coming in that. Fund balance appropriations for the fiscal year are reasonable, and there are nominal amendments to operating fund. And the departmental expenses overall are fairly compared. And that concludes that presentation. Any questions? on any of it? No question. No questions. That's always-
Any questions? Then, ready to move on to item 13, our union audit and services.
Item on the agenda is the year-end audit contract award. And I won't read the whole legislative memo item, but have you all the finance committee? We met with the finance committee last year and decided to bid the audit. We try to do it every 3 to 5 years. At that time, we chose the lowest bidder with the intent to award at least 2 subsequent years. This would be the second of those 3 years. You see the bids for the 3 years in your legislative memo. Last year was the cost of $8,900. This year would be a cost of $9,050. Even though we had the intent of keeping this relationship for 3 years, of course, the board has to sign an annual contract and award contract annually. You can't. do multiple contracts. We did not take this back to the finance committee this year because it was our understanding from the finance committee meetings last year that intent was for 3 years, and the board intent was the same based on prior legislative memo. So the staff recommendation is that the executive director, finance director recommend awarding an audit contract, audit firm of Winston Ranch Creek Evans and Company LLP, fiscal year 23-24 audit, cost of $9,050.
Okay, any questions? Comments? Do we hear a motion?
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Fund the contract. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed likewise. Let's have it. Motion carries. All right, there, we're getting into projects now. A Lake Road Water Booster Station Improvement Contract. Project contract award.
Mr. Chair, so during the spring of 2022, the Wausau City of Creedmoor service area was analyzed in a newly created water distribution system hydraulic model. Determine the flow characteristics related to water quality concerns. The model was performed by McGill Associates, a professional engineering firm. The conclusion of the analysis, further study was recommended in certain areas of the distribution system to address water pressure and water quality topics. One task included further analysis of the Lake Rogers Booster Pump Station. The pump station is designed to provide increased water pressure and chlorine at the upstream end of the water distribution network in Creedmoor. At the conclusion of the pump station analysis that was performed by McGill Associates, McGill determined that chlorine injection equipment was not working consistently and that a new chlorine injection system should be installed. This project is identified in the Saguasa fiscal year 23-33 CIP as project ID number 101-09, with an estimated cost of $225,000. During 2023, McGill Associates designed the pump station improvements. In November of 2023, McGill Associates released the work for public bidding. Public bids were opened on December 7th, 2023. Saguasa received a total of 3 bids for the project, and you can see in the table below in the analysis section the 3 bidders that provided us with their proposals. Moving from left to right in the table below, you'll see HG Reynolds Company, Carolina Civil Works, and Laughlin Sutton Construction Company. HG Reynolds of Henderson, North Carolina was the lowest responsible bidder with a total amount of $261,650. HG Reynolds is licensed to perform this type of work. Saguasa staff is recommending a construction contract be awarded to HG Reynolds Company, Henderson, North Carolina, as the lowest responsible bidder. In terms of the schedule, we will work on this project and work on completion as quickly as we can once we issue the notice to proceed. And we're hoping to get this project finished by July 1st of this calendar year. In terms of the financials related to this project, we talked about this project being identified as CIP PID number 10109. The estimated cost for this project was $225,000. You can see that due to low bid cost of $261,650 being greater, that staff will seek a budget amendment using available CIP fund balance to fund this project. In the next section, we talk about the low bidder cost award and also adding and recommending a 5% contingency to the construction project, bringing the total estimated cost for this project at this point to $274,733. The construction administration, or CA, for the project will be performed by McGill Associates, and the task order for this project has available balance for the CA, therefore no additional funding is needed. But you'll see in the financial summary section below that we have a project low cost, $261,650, a contingency 5% of $13,083, and the construction administration at less than $43,000, but we put $43,000 in there as far as the balance. The total project cost of $317,733. My recommendation is the board approve a contract with HG Reynolds Company Incorporated for the Lake Road Booster Pump Station Improvements Project, the not to exceed amount of $261,650, be given authority to review and approve change orders relating to unexpected conditions in an amount not to exceed $13,083 without further board approval, and also allow the executive director, Ross's attorney, and finance director to finalize and execute a contract with HG Reynolds Company Incorporated. I'm happy to answer any questions the board has regarding this project.
Do we have any questions?
So you said you're expecting it to be completed by July of this year?
That's what we're going to aim for, yes.
You know what is the starting date again?
For the project itself, hopefully we're executing March 1st.
Okay, that's when we're executing documents. You mean starting the project or we're executing the doc?
Well, usually when we execute the documents, we start the project at
Okay, all right.
the same time, so fast track the project was.
Hey, what's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Being no discussion, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. The ayes have it, motion carries. Item 15, wastewater treatment plant chemical storage system improvement project, contract award.
Thank you. The Saguasa wastewater treatment plant utilizes chemicals for the treatment process to meet the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality NCDEQ discharge requirements. The wastewater treatment plant has 9 bulk chemical storage tanks that are used in the treatment process. The chemical storage system has reached the end of its useful life and needs to be replaced. This project is identified in the Saguasa FY 23 through 33 CIP 107-02, an estimated cost of $800,000. In late 2022, McGill Associates, Saguasa's on-call engineering consultant, was authorized to provide the required analysis, design, bidding, and construction administration for the chemical tank storage replacement project. The cost for the professional engineering services is $146,500. McGill has performed that task under task order 22-1. In November 2023, McGill Associates released the work for public bidding. The bid proposals were opened on December 7th, and Saguasa received a total of, should be 4, correct, bids. You can see in the table below, moving from left to right, 4 bidders that we had. Low bid that we had was from WBK Construction LLC of Wake Forest. Bid cost of $865,000. Staff is recommending a construction contract be awarded to WGK Construction LLC, Wake Forest, North Carolina, as the responsible bidder. Following board approval, the contract will be finalized with WGK Construction. Notice to proceed will be issued. Pre-construction meeting will be held and the project will be completed sometime in the FY 24-25 fiscal year. And that's just based on the chemical tanks, the procurement process, and the delivery schedule for that. Additionally, I'll just pause for a moment here before we get into the financials. is another one of those projects where you have to demolish 9 tanks collectively while you still keep the in process. So it's a move where a couple of the tanks come out, a couple of new tanks go in with all the plumbing, and then the old tanks that weren't removed first phase come out, and the other tanks go back in. So we have to slow the process down a little bit just because of that, maintaining the wastewater treatment plant at the same time. In terms of our financials, as I mentioned, we had a estimated cost on this project of $800,000. The low bidder is $865,000. Change orders to the project are not anticipated. However, it's recommended to staff to include a 5% contingency, which would bring the total construction budget to $908,250. A budget amendment is necessary for this transaction, and a budget amendment is found in tonight's board meeting agenda to support this item. Talking about the construction administration for the project, McGill Associates will be performing the construction administration. Total cost for the CA is estimated at $92,650. Original task order 2-1 has a balance of $32,770. Therefore, additional funding of $59,880 is needed for the CA. Due to the additional funding needed for the CA, task order 22-1, task order needs to be amended and approved by the board of directors. A separate legislative memo is in tonight's agenda to address this item. In the financial summary, we have the project low bid cost, a contingency at 5%, construction administration for a total project cost of $1,900,000. Executive directors, my recommendation is to approve a contract with WGK Construction LLC, a wastewater treatment chemical system project for the not to exceed amount of $865,000. Be given authority to review and approve change orders relating to unexpected conditions in amount not to exceed $43,250 without further board approval, and to also allow the executive director, Seguasa attorney, and finance director to finalize and execute a contract with WGK Construction. Happy to answer any questions you may have about this project or the funding.
Any questions? Okay. No questions, then does anyone have a motion?
Make a motion that we accept the executive director's recommendations as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to hear a second.
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion on the motion? And we'll go to the vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. We're down to item 16, wastewater treatment plant chemical storage system replacement project. And this is to amend existing engineer services task order 22-1 for construction administration service.
Very good. So I think it's appropriate to jump past the background section since I just gave that to you on the previous legislative item, and we'll just jump down to the analysis where we're talking about the total project cost of $865,000 in construction administration services at a cost of $92,650, which is 10.7% of the estimated construction cost, a ratio that is in line with construction projects of this magnitude. We are currently authorized to spend $146,500 under task order 22-1. We have $32,770 remaining that we can apply to the anticipated construction administration expense of $92,650, leaving an unfunded balance of $59,880. Staff is requesting the board of directors approve the amendment task order 22-1 in the amount of $59,880 for a total not to exceed amount of $206,380. I will jump to my recommendation. The board of directors amend Seguasa McGill Associates task order 22-1 in the amount of $59,880 for a total not to exceed amount of $206,380 for construction administration services related to the construction of the wastewater treatment plant chemical storage system replacement project. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this item.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve the executive director's recommendation.
We have a motion to hear a second.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. Now we're down to item 17, our fiscal year 2023-24 budget amendment number 7, the Lake Road Pump Station Chemical Feed Improvement.
You have in your packet, item number 17, is budget amendment number 7, fiscal year 23-24. Background, the very similar presented, this is the funding of that project that the board just approved. You'll see in your, in the packet, previously approved budget amendments 1 through 6, totaling $3,659,954. Budget amendment number 7 will transfer one fund balance $49,733 to the projects and studies expense department, $49,733. The supporting document is in your agenda packet, and the executive director's recommendation is that the board of directors approve budget amendment number 7 is presented. I'll answer any questions you may, the BA.
If no one has any questions, we'll call for the motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. And now we're down to item 18, fiscal year 23-24 budget amendment number 8, wastewater treatment plant chemical storage system improvement.
Budget amendment 8 is similar to budget amendment 7, and that this is the money to fund the project the board has voted to award. Budget amendment 8, background material and financial, Scott has already presented the cost of the project. This is budget in place to appropriate the budget to fund that project. Budget amendments 1 through 7, including the ones previously approved tonight, total $3,709,687. Budget amendment number 8, transfer from designated fund balance $168,130 to the projects and studies expense department, $1,168,130. And the executive director's recommendation is that the board of directors approve budget amendment number 8 as presented. Questions on BAA?
Any questions?
To make a motion to approve the executive director's recommendation.
We have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. Now we're down to item 19, project updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I would, this evening, I'd like to just combine 19 and 20 in terms of project updates and comments from the executive director, if I may.
Yes.
I'd like to first of all say congratulations to the board chair and our vice chair this evening. I look forward to working with both of you this next year and your continued leadership on the Siglawassa board. Thank you for keeping our progress moving forward, and we still have a lot of work ahead of us, especially with the I-85 project. Thank you. Just a note that Chairman Gooch and I had the opportunity and were invited to the City of Creedmoor strategic planning session last weekend. I just wanted to say thank you to the City of Creedmoor representatives for the invite to share with the City of Creedmoor all the projects that Siglawassa is working on in the vicinity. And I hope the information was helpful to the City of Creedmoor in terms of your plans for your strategic projects within the City of Creedmoor. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments from our?
I don't have any unless somebody has questions.
Okay, well, now we'll go to comments from board members. Councilperson Vicky Daniels.
We had a very productive meeting. And I thought it was very informative and shared a lot of details. And I appreciate that. Makes the presentation smooth and gives us a better understanding of what the administration is going through. And congratulations to Chairman Gooch and Vice Chair. You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Robert Way.
No comments this evening.
All right. Commissioner McClamb is not with us. Commissioner Tim Karen.
Congratulations to the chairman and vice chairman for your reelections and to our executive director for securing, over the last 2 years, $70 million for these two projects. That's a yeoman's task for sure. And we're excited that we're on or ahead of schedule.
Thank you. Mayor Linda Jordan.
You know what Tim just said. Congratulations to both of you.
You. And Mayor Pro Tem Georgiana Chen.
Thank you to everyone who voted for me to be vice chair. I hope I can do a good job for you all. And have a good week.
All right. And I want to thank y'all for reelecting me as chair. I appreciate that. And hopefully we can continue moving forward and have a good year. Is there any further business to come before the board? No further business, then entertain a motion to adjourn.
Kevin's not here.
Pardon me?
Tenant's not here.
I said I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Always does a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Everybody ready to go home? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.